So starting with Lucinda, do you want to introduce yourself?
I knew you'd start with me.
It's in the lab. It's tradition.
So my name's Lucinda. I work with LEOLIN, which is a Fauna ready-to-wear brand, quite new, I would say, in the market. We've been around for 5 years. I've been in the business for the last 18. And prior to that, my background is very much brand management, general management, brand director, sales director across, particularly coming from a retail background, from the shop floor, definitely, and then getting into e-com quite early on with some great designer retailers, and just really sort of honing my skills, I guess, in small to medium-sized business, e-com, omni-channel, customer brand, wholesale.
Amazing, thank you. Passing to my good friend Nadia.
Hey everyone, so I'm Nadia. I'm at Flora and Fauna. If you don't know us, we're a sustainable online retailer. We predominantly sell third-party brands across most categories: wellness, makeup, skincare, and we're branching into some new categories like pet care as well. I've only been there 3 months, but it's been a really exciting 3 months. Prior to that, my experience is 6 years agency side, so I've lived the life Adam and many of you in the room have, and then another sort of 7/8 years brand side. One of those was consulting, predominantly focusing on retail, and for a long time mostly in fashion. When I started my career, also didn't have an e-commerce website, neither did Maya, and my job was to convince people like Bernie Brooks that they needed to sell mattresses and big beds online. It was a really, really fun time. Didn't work, but I was the last one laughing. I'm glad that we've come such a long way though, and it's interesting to see where the industry is at. So excited to chat to you about it tonight.
Thank you, Nadia. First of all, apologies for that photo. I'm coming in from a resort somewhere that probably was the only one I could find. My technical skills are not that great. Okay, I come from the big end of town. So basically, I was a group general manager at David Jones for a long time. I ran home and food for them. I ran marketing for a period of time. I know Bernie Brooks personally. Moving Bernie would be very, very tough. Prior to that, I actually had 8 years at Myer as well. Those were the days when Myer was a very different beast, part of the Coles Myer empire. So, it was quite a different thing back then. At the end of the David Jones journey, I joined Gazelle, and, that's really Tommy Hilfiger, Calvin Klein, Van Heusen. You probably all remember Trade Secret, or you don't. And we sold that to TK Maxx in the US, so that's where you're seeing the rollout of TK Maxx at the moment going on. So, I had a great 10 years there in reconstructing and resetting that business to a different business model. Now, all of these models are, big, slow-moving, and, any shift in a market temperature like you're feeling today can be quite different. So, small percentages mean big dollars in groups like that, and they're on skinny margins. So quite different to this. So why am I here? Quite funny, actually. I saw the light very late. You guys have been rolling around in the e-com world for quite some time. But my daughter's Sammy Robinson, so she's got the 1 Mile business. So I did a lot of work getting her running, and was really quite staggered at just how successful it was and how interesting that was. So upon selling Gazelle to the Americans, God bless the Americans, which was terrific. We started up a homewares business called Gigi and Tom as well. So we've been working with some of the guys around this room. And I've got to say, I've probably learned more in the last 3 years than I've learned in the last 10. So as much as when you're a CEO of a big organisation and you're trying to manage resource successfully, I think a lot of what's gone on, and particularly with COVID and what's come, it's been a staggering piece of fun to enter a market that's so fresh, new, different, dynamic. So one of the original rag traders. I am. But I'm seriously enjoying it thoroughly, and maybe I can bring some insights to you guys about how we look at slowdowns. and I've seen a lot of them. So we'll get to that, I think, eventually. But that's me.
Thanks, Pat. And over to Henry.
Well, don't follow Pat. So, yeah, I'm Henry. I work at Meta. So I'm probably in a slightly different camp to everybody else in that I help support businesses use our platform as they try to help them grow. I spent the last 4.5 years there. Before that, I was 12 years at Google. So I've exclusively only worked at Google and Facebook, what the article are known as, for those two. Yeah.
It's like the contract.
So, yeah, I am asked me to come, and I'm basically, I just want to kind of give my perspective as to what we're seeing. Obviously, there's been a lot of change from a digital perspective, and I can try and shed some light as to where I think it might be going, the unknown unknowns, whatever the right expression is. And yeah.
Henry has agreed to pass on ad credits for all businesses in the room. You will not do that.
You can actually check in your chair.
In terms of the QR code. Thanks for that, Henry. So just a bit of housekeeping. So nobody in the room is shy of social media here tonight. So shameless plug. So if you meet someone, take a photo, post it, upload it, it goes a long way. So thank you very much. Toilets around the corner down the white corridor. Anyone needs to go. There'll be an opportunity for questions at the end of the evening if you scan the QR code. There'll be a portal that you can just drop some questions in, and that will come to my phone and we'll discuss it at the end. And finally, today is Are You OK Day. So try have a conversation that matters tonight. I've had pretty questionable mental health over the last 2 years running an agency during a very, very large and rocky e-commerce pandemic. I think everyone in the room shares that mantra. But yeah, have a conversation that matters, make it memorable, do something that counts. So I'm going to dive into it. So first question of the evening. I'm going to cherry pick a few people throughout the way. So feelings. So I guess question one of the first evening to open up for everyone. It has been a roller coaster of the year. Constant news of uncertainty, a lot of inflation. In Tuesday, there was already an interest rate rise. Lots of media going up, lots of talent going up. I guess, do you think this is exaggerated, being in certain positions that you guys sit in? And do you feel that the squeeze might be potentially coming in the future? Nadia, Lucinda, go first.
I'm happy to go.
Take it.
Let me just say, I love macroeconomics. Love, what comes out of that. And I think you've got to be very aware of it, particularly in big businesses. I think this room is going to be a lot more nimble in the sense of what that looks like. But I think one of the things to be careful is there's a lot of bad news coming out of Britain and Europe, and there's a lot of really tough stuff coming out of the US too. We're not that. There's no question we're seeing inflation really for the first time in, I reckon, about 25 years. I really have to reach back to the playbook of when inflation hit, in Australia, and the way you manage inflation, price rise, and can you do it? Because really in the last 20 years, that's not been the case. If anything, we've seen a deflationary price market. So the average pricing has been dropping. So I think that's real, and I think a lot of inputs coming into your businesses are rising. I think some of those, again, are quite real, and some of those are possibly people taking advantage of the fact that it is inflation and they think they can get away with it. So for everyone in the room, that's managing a business, whether it's on the cost or the revenue side, inflation is a difficult thing. The Reserve Bank out there, really squeezing down on it is a good thing because it's very tough to manage when it's in and established. So I think, I remember 91 when it was about a 15% interest rate. And you can just imagine the pain that was going on there. That was a very true recession. And when people really do stop spending, it comes in really distinct ways. And, that's different customers respond differently. Different product groups respond very differently. And maybe if I just give a quick example of that, and I'll pass it over. But, in department stores, when a squeeze comes, if you don't predict it, you're running on thin margins. You've got a problem if you don't try and manage what that implication is. So one of the examples on the product side might be that discretionary products definitely fall back. And, when you say discretionary, guys treat everything as discretionary. So the male shopper really stops. and it's not the fact that the recession's in, it's just the fear and the consideration of it that stop them. Now, I'm not necessarily saying that's the case this time, but, that's one of the syndromes you do see. On the other side of that, luxury items, small luxury items go very, very well. So, when you look at where the slowdowns that have occurred in the last 20 years, things like cosmetics and lipstick, you bump their budget up, they're going to do better. So they actually, people come off the higher expenditure and look for other reasons to feel good about themselves. So, I think as you come into a tight period, what product groups, why are customers doing what they're doing, trying to understand what your price structures are versus the inflationary impacts that are coming in cost, two big considerations. So I think it's real because of the inflation we're seeing.
Yeah.
The question of how far it will go with full job, we've got a very employed market and high savings. I think everyone has to make their own call on those things.
Thank you. I guess I'll hand it over to the others, but I guess that lipstick effect is true. That's proven throughout multiple times. I think Nadia and Lucy in the room, we've spoken about this a few times. You actually got me onto it as well. So that's the thing, you should Google it. Just maybe passing it on to Henry, Nadia, Lucinda.
Yeah, I'll have a stab. I think inflation aside, we have to remember inflation is also something that the Reserve Bank uses to not send the country into a deep recession. So it's a method to help prevent GFCs, essentially. But inflation aside, I think if you tap into the psychology of consumers right now, last year at this time, we were all in tight lockdown. I think it was the strictest it had been in Sydney specifically. And the things that we were purchasing during that time were things that we could enjoy at home and made us feel entertained or more comfortable in that environment. And we spent money on our homes and ourselves in a very, very different way. Now, there's not a person that was running a company, and it's called a CEO for the sake of it, but there's like a CMO or a CEO over the last 2 years that is good at their job that would know we would not be here today. There's no way. If you know marketing, you knew you were going to get to the point where we are today. And essentially, that was consumer spending was going to shift, and it was going to shift back and probably go much harder into other categories, such as travel. And LEOLIN, as an example, is probably, and Luce may talk to this, but party dresses are way back up, but they weren't last year. So I think we were all very well aware that consumer spending was going to shift. I think the best thing you could have done during the last 2 years is pocket your profit to save it for growth and reinvest right now, because most people would have seen this coming, not just on a psychological level and on a macroeconomic level if you understand consumers and consumer spending, but it's about how you managed your business over the last 2 years, because there's no doubt a lot of businesses had growth, and those that did are probably going to struggle right now. So I would be questioning them and your CEOs about, well, the last 2 years have been epic and the growth has been incredible, but what are we doing with the profit that we really got from the last 2 years? Because, yeah.
Like that retail hangover following a very hard surge in performance is real. You see it after Black Friday, you see it after Boxing Day, but I guess after 2 consecutive years, the brands can sort of ask themselves, can we accept or facilitate negative growth in a certain situation on the back of a very, very good 2-year run?
And I think it comes down to your, what's your lending structure for your working capital? Like, how have you been managing your debt to profit ratio? But honestly, I think most good brands and good retailers should be able to look at the last 2 years and just figure out where they can reinvest that profit.
Maybe Lucinda, on maybe a tactical level, I know we've been working very closely together on all sorts of different bits and pieces across performance and CRO or web dev.
Yeah.
Maybe, is there anything, maybe 2 or 3 items that you wanted to touch on?
I think it's definitely been a wild ride the last 2 years. I think both that I've got a 2-year-old. So I've got a COVID baby, so I've got this real bookend for COVID and it's really clear memory of when it all started and, the peaks and troughs of it all. And I think the troughs have been significant for our niche, which is party event wear. because we've really, whilst we've enjoyed what happened when people came out of lockdown, we really suffered and, at times struggled to keep the lights on and people employed when we were in lockdown because no one's buying party dresses or party shoes. So I think talking to your point about category, then just like stop. So we had to double down on just surviving. So that was a really interesting time. I was so proud of the team that we came out the other side of it. And, kept everyone on in the business because there were those conversations we were having, like, how do we keep going? What is the strategy? How do we do this day by day? And those were the conversations we were having. So I think it's, again, then to Nadia's point, saying having an eye on the prize and looking at the bigger picture, investing time, energy, money into systems, process, double down on technology, and just sort of underpinning the growth that we knew would come. Because we were talking about it in our team, like, what do we want more than anything? We want to come out, we want to party, we want to celebrate, and we want to do it, with gusto. And so that's really what we focused on was 6 months, 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, whatever that looked like. It was such an unknown at that time.
Yeah.
How do we come out the other side, and let's make sure we're ready for it?
I think you and I, we had very big conversations on investing on existing customers, servicing them to the best of your ability, focusing on retention and reconversion. I know we did a lot on the Klaviyo side, especially just on a tactical level, for reconversion, churn risk, and even customer service and Gorgeous as well. That was a big implementation. But also just ultimately thinking about, we put big money in investing and acquiring these customers. What can we do to retain them? Everyone in the room knows that purchasing the customer once is the most expensive part of the journey. Getting them the second, third from organic and CRM has its power. But I guess, are there any other elements from a tactical level that we may have explored?
I think, it's definitely about sort of finding that new customer, which you led us so well on, and then really making her, ours to keep, and that loyalty, retention, talking to her with a point of difference, honing in on our brand DNA and really finding our niche, and amplifying that. I think not trying to be everything to everyone from a content and product perspective is really driven a lot of our following and loyalty.
We started USA, just dabbling as well.
Yeah.
That had a positive return.
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. And I think doing that through Shopify Markets was really helpful in sort of a low investment, dip our toe in,
Definitely.
see what the reaction is like, and then, make a decision on how we invest from there based on demand, as opposed to
the big investment, a whole new store, separate ERP. Yeah, exactly. I might just pass it to Henry on the media side. I mean, we spend a lot of money on Facebook. I think as an agency, we're spending like 40 million a year on Meta, which is absurd. It does well for our clients. I guess, like, from the media side and the conversations that you might be having with Meta, previously known as Facebook, Instagram, what are the conversations looking like, especially now normalizing out of that crazy surge?
Yeah, so the surge is over. And the way that we're thinking about it is, our job is really advisory. My perspective will be kind of how are we thinking about advising businesses moving forward. And some of the things that we're thinking about now is about audience, like the things that you're talking about, and that audience, and who is actually going to be impacted. So an increase in interest rates on a mortgage, or who has a mortgage, who is going to be impacted? One of these very large amounts of people who will be impacted, and what will they do about it? So, young people who haven't been able to buy a house, so will they be impacted? And actually, the second cost of development is already raised. So, what we're thinking about is how can we advise on, how do we reach different people? Will these people change their habits? There's quite a strong debate about the idea of value and a value shopper, and what that really means, and whether, everyone's a value, isn't everyone a value shopper? It's kind of the overly question. We're thinking about these questions, and then how does our platform potentially help that? So, if you're coming to our platform, are they value, are they not? Well, the whole point is you can start to have that first conversation before they're getting that. So we're just trying to think about how habits might change, who the audience is going to be, and then what the solution will be. But something that we're really focused on is, as a business, we're very, like you've experienced, if you're having a conversation with someone. Side work is we get a solution. Here's a solution. And it's like, you just step back and think of it, and then we'll talk, and then we'll think about a solution. So something that we're also doing as a business is trying to be a lot more in the customer's shoes before we go to that solution, to think about what it is that we're trying to solve, and then to bring the solution to that. So bit of a winding story, but yeah, we're really thinking about who are the impacted audiences, how might we advise on what that means for how they will be using our platform, will they be changing habits, and does that matter? I think that matter, I don't know, but ultimately, yeah, we believe it's coming, and probably the greatest will be, we think, from talking to economists and analysts and people who will come and speak to us, is that it's probably rolling through Christmas and actually the impact probably next.
Yeah.
But I'm very worried. I'm not the economist, and I would be very worried of doing that.
I mean, yeah, everyone in the room needs to take an opinion or a perception, having just feeling what their brand is doing, what the customers are doing. I guess to amplify or compound on COVID, that whole iOS fiasco caused more drama mid-flight with all the other bullshit going on.
Yeah.
I think, again, everyone in the room felt it, and I think a big thing that what we started doing with our meta partner managers was the focus on uplift studies, focus on actually understanding contribution margin and the question everyone's asking is like, is this actually working? Like, I'm spending big bucks, and like, if I stop spend, would it still come in? It's sort of like a conversation that everyone's having in the back of their head. And I guess like Meta has been out of like all the ad networks that we work with, and I can name them, TikTok, Google, Pin, everyone, Spotify. They're taking the most proactive approach in three things. One, uplift studies. So can I make two sales, not cross-contaminate them, and see if I don't show advertising to these people, will this actually give me an uplift? And then there's also incrementality. So do everything as you do, but do one thing at a time. And then actually see if I do this incremental change, what's the ground uptick across everything else. And I think from a platform perspective, that's given us as an agency and a lot of the brands we work with a lot more comfort in saying, cool, this is kind of feeling like it's working, rather than it's working at all. I don't think it's going to be exact. And I don't think anyone in the room should be doing last contribution as well. It's crazy. But no, thank you for that. I guess like talking about performance and measuring performance, I think everyone in the room, again, knows the Q4 season, Black Friday, Boxing Day, the sale period is a bit of a double-edged sword. You discount, you acquire, having won the wrong idea. I guess from a tactical level, not every brand in the room wants a discount. It doesn't make the contribution doesn't make sense, the margins don't make sense, but we do it because everyone else is doing it. And it's a bit of a, I've been doing this for 8 years, I'm still relatively young, but it's a fucking annoying conversation. It's a bit of a, do we go 15, 20%, 25%, oh, they're doing this? But I guess like eliminating the discount. What do you feel that other brands could be doing creatively, walking into, or even thinking about walking into a hardcore Q4 sale period on the back of like a bit of rocky spending, like asking us to actually understand what can we do potentially differently. I might, maybe Nadia, do you have any ideas? And you can pass it.
Info today.
Yeah, that's
Yeah, look, I'm pretty passionate about discounting, and every business I've walked into, I've turned that tap off. The difficult thing is coming up to the period most retailers are now, Black Friday. Year-on-year comping is incredibly difficult to do, and at the end of the day, the difference between profitability and cash, and a lot of retailers rely on cash over that period to reinvest into purchasing stock, et cetera, et cetera. So the first thing you need to do is understand and establish how reliant is a business on cash, and where is that cash coming from? Is it coming from just the sale, or is there other working capital that can be accessed to turn that around? Then you need to understand the value of that brand, because at the end of the day, you have to convince the board, CEO, whoever else it may be, and your consumers that you are worth buying full price all the time. There's a million ways that you can do that, but at the end of the day, a brand is a promise to a customer. And my view is that as soon as you discount, you've denied that promise, because it's incredibly frustrating. One day you come to a website and not a lot of people purchase the first time. Thanks, Adam, for reminding me not to measure last click attribution. But they come over time. And those that do come and they purchase it because they've seen it on an Instagrammer, the suit I'm wearing right now is very sold out and only launched yesterday.
The resale value.
There is definitely a lot of people that do come in to purchase something with the hype of the brand's creation and the value wasn't discounted. I had to put my name and sit and dance and send videos to the store staff. But there's definitely value that brands can create. It's just about understanding how they unlock that value. So luxury brands and brands like LEOLIN can do it by creating demand. And Supreme exists off that model. Understand your what products are really going to drive that demand and how you get them into your comms. Selling out is great, but you have to understand what's going to keep the business moving as well. What are those products that are essentially core mass market drivers that everyone will always want? And Camilla and Mark, which I also worked at, we did a lot of work in understanding that and coming up with a model constantly having those sub 150 products. Have that tab on. So not a lot of consumers can come in and buy $1,000 food that's okay, because they have to have that. Thanks, Afterpay, I think it's just about understanding, one, what is the appetite for the business to actually change that discounting strategy. And it comes down to cash. You've got to understand where that cash is from. You can probably prove the profit model from removing discounting. And at the end of the day, they're walking away with profit. They're taking a salary, but at the end of the day, profit is really what drives value for a business. And it gives the business the opportunity to reinvest it.
I think that's a very good point, because most brands, especially in the COVID, any retailer in the room that had any form of private equity or any sort of valuation looked at them, a lot of them were actually valued on a top line revenue figure. Historically, that was never. It was always your balance sheet, it was always your EBITDA, your net profit. Now, what has changed is a tighter rope on profit, and a lot of brands, we've done 80% of our clients have changed purely because the cost of trafficking was expensive. And then I think there was a lot of animosity and a lot of anxiety doing that. But I think after it was done, it was like, wow, we actually get a bigger bang for our buck. We're also realigning on what we need to be doing as well as a business, focusing on that profitability. Just touching on inventory for a second. I know, so you would have seen lots of dead inventory in your time. That's some good inventory. And we don't want to diminish menswear, because that's where it might go to. I'm going to be buying
It's the highest margin business you can get. Okay.
yeah,
I think the points you made were very valid. I think it's a general thing going into a slowdown. You don't want to change your strategy. What you're talking about, is really the strategy of the business and to avoid discounting your business. There are a lot of different consumers in the market. There are consumers that will only buy. So, I think for your, trying to understand your own brand and why you fit and what you do, what you're espousing is absolutely right. And it's right every day. I think when you're coming into a slowdown, most businesses set goals that are ambitious. You want your people striving for targets that are higher. So you do set, your business goals to be higher. Your OTB goes up and you employ better people because you think they're going to help you grow the business further. There's a lot of that that's going to go on. So the fundamentals of your business are going to get bigger. And the reality when you come into a slowdown is trying to understand if it's going to hit you or not. So in other words, that plan is going to change. And the fundamentals of the type of manager you need could change. So, and the bigger you are, the harder this gets. When you're spending $2 billion in the business in OTB to buy stock, if you get it wrong by certain percentages, you got $50 million of stock sitting around. It can be really trouble. That's huge. And generally, slowdowns take, 18 months to really clean up if you're caught in it. I'm not saying you're caught in it, I'm just saying if you are. And that 18 months at the end of it, really, your stock's out of alignment. You're now in a position where, it's not purely clean. You're having to take contractions in margin to get rid of it. And even your mix is missing the boat a bit. And now the consumer's seeing your brand look a little different. So picking a slowdown and cleaning up where you are in stock is absolutely critical. There's a thing in retail that's always been the case. First markdown is going to be the best one and get rid of it. And if you come into a contraction, that is never truer. So I'm not trying to scare anyone here in the sense of what that can look like, because everyone's business here is probably high octane growth. And you don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, no question of that. But you have to set a realistic goal for your business that you know you can achieve. If you are going to set a goal that's ambitious into a slowdown and you miss it, you're going to go through quarterly updates where you continue to miss it. And then you're going to have to get rid of the stock that you bought. Then you're going to take markdowns. Then you're going to have to think about distribution and why you do it. It's too pitching. So then you're really in a position you're chasing money. Now, whether you've got somebody that's sponsoring you or you're having to go to a bank, as soon as you end up in that situation, money is no longer free. The interest rates have gone up. It's expensive now. So if you catch yourself into a slowdown where you're contracting and you're chasing yourself in the sense of what that cash flow might look like, you are going to have a problem. And I can tell you categorically, I've seen plenty of good businesses walk into, whether it be David Jones, Myer, Gazelle Group, and have very good reasons to be who they are, and will certainly look at every reason why they weren't successful. It comes down to setting a plan where they were realistic about what they were doing and they had an ability to execute. So the best advice I'd ever give, I said this to guys on the phone the other day, set a realistic plan, communicate it incredibly well through your staff and through your stakeholders, align everyone, and then celebrate when you beat the target, whatever it is.
And reward your agency.
Yeah. And reward,
agency technique. Yeah, either way. We'll do it.
Yeah, but it's a slightly different management style of high growth. You've got to look at your costs. You've got to understand, I'm not talking about, you want to retain your great staff, but every cost can be looked at. There are a number of things you can do in business that you really got to think about.
It's a good point on inventory mix, because we've been working with a lot of brands that have truthfully overcommitted to inventory over the period because they made decisions based on growth that was artificially inflated. That stuck. Fortunately, a lot of our brands don't have perishable goods, so that's convenient. But they also have seasonal and fashionable goods, which go out of style in winter and summer, which then sort of forces them to create archive stores, clearance sales, and then they fall into their own trap. I think there's a ratio there. I think that we're not dismissing margin, we're not dismissing discounting, but there's a formula and a down to do it in the right way. So we have a brand that says it has an archive store now. It's gated. It opens up twice a year. The shopping period is limited. It's discounted. Sales are final. There's no return or refund. And it's a very modern and innovative way to, one, re-engage the customers, segment repeats better, and just put them in a bucket to say, hey, we've got...
I'd argue that's good strategy to do. Like that's a normal strategy. That's tidying up, free your money up, spend it on
Free the money up, exactly.
Into a slowdown, you may be caught hard of that. If you've got to define whether you think you're going into it or not going into it. Customer type, who you're protecting, blah, blah. But, you being clean coming into a slowdown is really important. In big businesses, often the management will set buffers up. There'll be 10% of the money put aside that no one knows is there, right? And if things get better, it'll get freed up. It'll come. Any great ideas? Yep, how it comes. Anyway, so I just think, if you feel you're going into a slowdown, set realistic goals, hit them, and celebrate them. Yeah, amazing. 18 months, it'll take you.
I don't know where I am for time, so I think I've got two more questions. One of them was on team. I think we touched on it as well, and it's like the cockpit of every retail brand is dependent on the team that's powering it. Everyone in the room, again, knows that and appreciates that. I think we've been working with brands that have put a very solid investment in team and making sure that the right attitude, the right culture is available in the brand to actually lift the weight when we need to. I know, Lucinda, like we spoke about this at length, that it's happening at LEOLIN, and a big change of structure, a lot of new talent coming in. What maybe are some of the things that you've done or recruited for in terms of building and growing the team, and retaining that team, more importantly?
It's the core of our business, definitely our team. I think I'm not telling anyone here how to suck eggs. I feel like what we do in our team is, we strive to be a value-led business. We want to create an environment that we would want to be a part of, I think, and hopefully they're not buzzwords, but, transparency, honesty, integrity, accountability, just, I think really fostering that and making sure that when we're recruiting, that they're the key principles that we're looking for when we are recruiting in the team. And I think the skills and the technical side, we can teach that. If we are able to, then we can, and it's making those decisions. And we've gone from a team, to give you a context, we've gone from, when I started consulting with Leo, there were 4 in the business, and there's now 14. And that's in our Australian office. We also have a studio in Dalian, which is Leo's hometown, where we do design and production. The sales, operations, and marketing essentially is what we've built in the Sydney office. And we kind of went through this interesting thing of growing the team, having a strategy to go from 4 to whatever it looked like to hit the goals that we had in the business. And then COVID, really grabbed us and shook us hard with a new team on board.
Doing it remotely?
Yeah,
well,
we went from, we had one girl, she just left her job, and then we were like, we're in lockdown, the first day of joining our team was from home, and things like that. Just, I think COVID, from a team perspective, actually brought us closer together. We got more efficient with our communication. We were a lot more close-knit, and we just got better. And we were small enough that we could be nimble. I love that word that you used before, because we connected, and I think it was just this responsibility to each other that we really foster, and that has stayed with us. So I actually am grateful for COVID in a way. I guess. And the foundation to the team.
Yeah. And I mean, the Slack noise for me is very triggering these days.
Totally.
It's been pretty chaotic, but I guess you have to also think of some of the tools, think the attitudes, and in the end, everyone was changing their role for a difference and a change.
Yeah.
The brand promise to the talent is to deliver that.
Totally.
Giving a different experience and give them something that they're learning from and actually getting from. And I mean, everyone learned during that period.
Totally.
Even the most seasoned.
Yeah.
No one would have expected, I guess they talk about a black swan event, right? No one would have expected retail to boom that aggressively.
Yeah.
I mean, I've got 2 yoga mats. I've used them 5 times, maybe. So.
It's pretty for everyone except for us.
Yeah. But I remember when lockdown opened up and they removed it, and then there was a big picnic surge, and we had one client doing picnic, selling sheet sets as picnic blankets, and there was a day and night difference for you and I.
Absolutely.
And I called you and was like, Lucinda, we need to fucking spend money. It's happening. It's on.
Yeah. Those picnic EDMs that were just going in the inbox. Yeah.
Awesome. Well,
to your point, just quickly, spending money. During a recession, a lot of brands actually do the opposite. Just keep that in mind, because the successful brands actually go a lot harder during recessions. And I think that's sort of one of the things that happened in the initial stages of COVID. I certainly noticed that looking just at Google ads and Facebook spend, a lot of people just cut their budget. Just went 50% down, some 100% down. I did the opposite. And that trajectory it gave us off the back of that was incredible. So just bear in mind that everyone's feeling what we're all feeling. Someone brave that has the right investment and working capital to support the growth and belief in the brand and belief in the customers can actually invest a little bit more right now. Just make sure that you're using the right audiences to capture that value consumer. And in my mind, value consumer is someone who believes in the brand that you created a promise for.
I think just to close it out on that note, so it's a very media heavy topic, Henry, and I think any closing remarks on I guess like fluctuations of usage of media. We'll take it to questions in a moment just to round it out. But I guess like usage of media, cohorting, types of audiences. Are you seeing anything particular on the meta side?
There's about 15 things that I've quietly not jumped in on, but the first one was all the way back to ATT. And I think that the interesting thing that we're now starting to align on with everyone who I speak to is that we need to be incredibly confident that the next dollar spent is the best possible dollar that I can spend. And so we're having a lot of very deep conversations about measurements. So when you said, oh, attribution, I was like, oh, it's bricked up. And we're talking a lot about that. How do you actually use some regression model to help predict things going forwards from a media investment point of view? What is incremental? Like, where is that net new customer coming from? And how much do they cost versus the customer that we've already got? Do I have to think differently about those two cohorts? Will those costs be different? Ultimately, the answer is yes, but you need to be confident in that you can measure that and you can report back to where that needs to be reported back on. I'm going to spend more here, but it's going to be worth it.
That's a very, very big point because we've been trained to talk about CAC for a decade.
Yeah.
Customer acquisition costs, or customer acquisition costs. But we put an N in front of it, so what's a new customer acquisition cost? What and how can we use a series of customer conversions and a bit more modeling to see how much we're actually spending to acquire net new, and then what's the expectancy for them to keep spending on an LTV basis?
Yeah.
That is the most effective way to do performance marketing right now. But yeah, sorry to cut you in there.
No.
That's a very good point, though.
It's how we're kind of getting to. So we spent last week we had a bunch of clients for 2 days in Melbourne, and then this week 2 days. For somebody to come in and spend 2 days purely just with us, it's humbling. And what we were trying to do with them was we have an open source MMM. MMM is very expensive, like prohibitively expensive. What we were trying to do was in those 2 days was to get people who weren't, to be able to walk out and say, I've written something that is the basis of an MMM, so I can start to think about this moving forward, and I can take it back to my CMO and have that conversation.
So just for on MMM media mix modeling, it's the alternative approach to platform attribution, and it's using hardcore computations and stats to figure out what are all the permutations that my media can run at. If I do this, what would happen here? But also, most importantly, tell me what the diminishing return is after I spend a certain amount.
Next level spend.
Yeah, exactly.
That's endless fun. So we're pushing hard down there, but it means like, who do you have in your team who's able to do that? Whose responsibility is to help to train people do that? We have a lot of conversations that is like, I will not talk to you about attribution because I believe in this is my attribution model and I'm comfortable with it. So we have to change the conversation and find new ways to approach it. Maybe this audience is slightly different. Meta on Facebook.
It does require a minimum spend to actually be effective. I mean, there are parameters to answer that.
Yeah, absolutely. Incrementality is sure because it's all based on, so you have to have it's that what you're doing is actually going to go. And I think the other side of it is definitely that talent conversation of, like, I don't know what the right question to be asking. Like, what is that right question I should be asking to correct the hypothesis, then go and do the test, to then get confident that I made a really good decision, but then I can go back to my board and say, nailed this.
Yeah, that's like a big insight for me running an agency where I work with brands that don't necessarily or can't afford access to a data science role or data engineer. And it's not really, they don't know how to train them, they don't know how to hire them, they don't really know how to manage them. But it's something that an agency we're investing in now for next year to say, hey, we can lease this talent. You don't need it necessarily full time, but we can lease it at a certain increment. Say, hey, I think what we're doing here and what we're seeing with others can actually provide an uplift. And again, it just goes back to everything that iOS is pushing with iOS changes.
And with that, like, I think what you guys have effectively done to it over the last couple of years, the very, very crude way of saying it is, you put one in, you got four out. It was just bonkers. The whole thing was bonkers. And we were trying to work out like, wow, how do we help these people? They're just going crazy. What else should we be doing? So completely different conversations, but then now it's like, well, I need to really understand every single decision that I'm going to make next.
And there are a lot of decisions.
And there are a lot of decisions, and I don't know how completely what's happening. So how do you create that learning agenda?
Yeah.
How do I go from A to B to C to get to the point where I can explain that coming into this big trading period with you guys, retail, my assumption is that this is the profitable period. In the conversations we have, how crucial this is. So, we spend a lot of time testing, and I think, if it's okay to give like the kind of advice of what we think might be useful coming into this, like the CRM or the first party data, how do you want to think about it? Like really, really getting it nailed, using that as your source of truth. We're having some really interesting conversations with pretty big businesses who are skipping straight past Ads Manager, Google.
Even beyond Cappy, just get your hard CRM data in there.
Get Cappy, get the pipe sorted, and then when you're running, looking at that source of truth, we're kind of looking at the data that's in our platform, and then we'll just go to your source of truth and start pulling through the incrementality and work on that kind of stuff.
I think just to double click on just that attribution of first party data. So one of the partners, Kendo, has a new product coming in. So historically UGC sort of app that most of you would know in the Shopify space, but now doing more first party data collection to actually saying, hey, this MMM stuff scares me. I don't know what's going on, but I just want to simply do a post-purchase survey and say, hey, how did you hear about it? Kendo is a very easy and cheap app to facilitate that says like, okay, cool, I'm only sampling, let's say 20%, 30% of my audience, but at least they can get an indication on what the drivers are, and there's no cost to that. I've got 5 minutes left. I'm going to move to questions, and everyone's quite hungry. Yeah. So first things first, and Henry, you don't have to answer this. For Meta, are you looking to reduce the entry to brand uplift studies?
Yes, branding. Yeah. So that's relatively simpler because you don't need a lot of signal. You don't need, it's how you're buying. So you can get a lot of eyeballs pretty cheap. So you can get to statistical relevance pretty quick. I think the tricky one is conversion. So conversion lift, where you need to have confidence that I'm answering a question and I need to know that it's right. Marketing science guys, they're just purists. Like the thing with my experience of the last 4.5 years is marketing science has always been there, but they just been banging their head against the wall because they got 1 in equals 4 out, and it's just been brilliant. And now they just stepped into like, I want these people in every single conversation that I have. And that's the people who are, when we're talking about digital, or even, we're starting to have we've seen this transition of power somewhere from these environments to CMOs saying, well, why are you spending that? So we have to do this education piece, and having statistical backing and really helps somebody who comes from a finance and numbers background to have confidence that they can keep giving that money to the CMO.
Yeah.
So it's been a really interesting transition period for that. I think it's just the beginning of it, because up until, can't be integration stuff, until that was even released, then conversion was just out signals. So you couldn't measure. So there was a period where you basically couldn't. So even that had to be rebuilt from the ground. Now they're talking about decentralized learning where nobody talks to anyone. It's kind of and the bigger business is how many people work in what is X data team. How many people work in Amazon's. So, they can get to their targets and they have a lot of those targets. When you don't, you can't fly off in different areas. But this is why I think that the conversation that we're trying to have with people as well is, if you do have a really good, you have it's done and you're passing about PII and then you reach people. What we're trying to, next conversation we're trying to have, and this might be really interesting coming to people, I want to take hold of the reins, not let go of the reins, because I've never held the reins, and we're pushing people, we're retesting, but we're pushing people to actually consider how machine learning actually
Amazing. I'll let a few others ping his friend after this. Just a final question. Giftnote. Q4 is the gifting season. Giftnote is a brainchild or a tech app that Elephant Room, our agency's built. It's a checkout app that allows you to send paperless messages when an item is delivered. We have a few customers in the room. Croft is one that basically allows a merchant or a retailer to offer a paperless gifting experience that doesn't impact your 3PL, but also allows you to quantify how many of your orders are actually gifts. And it's a very nice personalized touch. You can add potentially video in the future and a few nice things that's sent at delivery during the Q4 period. And it just allows brands to merchandise a different gifting experience. More than happy to chat about it as well. But I wanted to thank our speakers for their time and generosity. We very much appreciate the insight. It was wonderful. We have a handful of gifts. I might call on Shane. Yeah, there's 2 bags there, Nick as well. Thank you for participating. It was great. No doubt anyone else in the room, feel free to ask questions, but thank you. Henry. Awesome. So, food is served. Do what you need to do. Thank you for the time and thank you for coming, everybody.